The subway car lurched, and I stumbled, my half-eaten corn on the cob jabbing into someone's backside. A sharp "hey" cut through the din of the packed New York City train, and I froze, heart pounding, as a pair of piercing brown eyes locked onto mine. Before I could stammer an apology, he smirked, leaned in, and whispered, "Perv," with a grin that turned my embarrassment into something dangerously warm. I'm Jalen Carter, 24, a graphic designer scraping by in Brooklyn, navigating life as a black gay man in a city that's equal parts dream and hustle. That Tuesday evening, I was just trying to get home after a long day, clutching my corn, my guilty pleasure from the street vendor outside my office. The subway was a sardine can, bodies pressed so tight I could feel the collective pulse of the city. I didn't mean to poke anyone, least of all him. The guy with the tousled dark hair, sharp jawline, and a vibe that screamed trouble in the best way. His name, I'd learn later, was Mateo Alvarez, 26, a barista and aspiring musician with a Puerto Rican spark that lit up any room or subway car. But in that moment, he was just the hot guy but I'd accidentally assaulted with my snack. "You always attack strangers with vegetables?" he teased, his voice low and playful, cutting through the rumble of the train. I laughed, nerves jangling, and held up the corn like a white flag. "Only when the train's trying to kill me," I shot back, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. The crowd shifted, pushing us closer. His shoulder brushed mine, and I caught a whiff of his cologne, something spicy, like cedar and lime. My pulse didn't know whether to race or stop entirely. "I'm Mateo," he said, extending a hand, his fingers warm as they grazed mine. "Jalen," I replied, hoping my palm wasn't as sweaty as it felt. The train screeched into a station, and for a second, I thought he'd disappear into the chaos. But he stayed, his eyes holding mine like we were the only two people in the car. We talked about nothing and everything. He told me about his gigs at small venues in the East Village, how he poured his soul into lyrics no one heard yet. I admitted I doodled comics in my spare time, dreaming of a graphic novel that might never see daylight. The train jolted again, and this time, he steadied me with a hand on my arm, his touch lingering just a second too long. "Careful, corn guy," he said, that smirk returning. I wanted to bottle that moment, the heat of his hand, the flicker of possibility in his gaze. But then the train doors opened, and a woman's voice sliced through the air. "Mateo? What the hell?" A tall, striking woman with long braids and a furious expression stood at the platform, glaring at us. Mateo's face tightened, and my stomach dropped. "Elena," he said, his voice flat, like he'd been caught. She stormed toward us, her eyes darting between me and the corn still in my hand. "Who's this?" she demanded, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. I didn't know who she was, girlfriend, ex-friend, but the air turned heavy, like the subway had become a pressure cooker. Mateo hesitated, and I felt the weight of unspoken history between them. "Just a guy I met," he said, but his eyes flicked to me with an apology I couldn't quite read. Elena scoffed, crossing her arms. "You're unbelievable," she spat, then turned to me. "Watch yourself with this one. He's got a habit of breaking things." The doors hissed shut, and she was gone, but the moment lingered like a bruise. Mateo rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my gaze. He muttered, as if that explained everything. I wanted to ask more, but the train was slowing again, my stop. I had seconds to decide, walk away or take a chance. "You owe me a new corn," I said, forcing a grin. "Meet me at the vendor on 14th Street tomorrow. 6 p.m. His eyes lit up, that smirk creeping back. "Deal, corn guy." I stepped onto the platform, heart hammering, the city's pulse thrumming in my veins. I didn't know what I'd just started, but for the first time in months, I felt alive. The next evening, I stood outside the corn vendor's cart on 14th Street. the city's neon glow painting the sidewalk in hues of pink and gold. My stomach churned, not from hunger, but from the reckless hope that Mateo would actually show. I'd spent the day replaying our subway encounter. His smirk burned into my brain like a song I couldn't stop humming. He arrived 5 minutes late, his guitar case slung over one shoulder, his dark hair catching the streetlight's gleam. "Corn guy," he greeted, his voice warm but guarded, like he was testing the waters. "You showed," I said, trying to sound casual despite the way my heart tripped over itself. He grinned, but there was a shadow in his eyes, something heavier than the playful spark from yesterday. We grabbed corn from the vendor, his treat, he insisted, and wandered toward Union Square, the park buzzing with after-work crowds and street performers. As we walked, he opened up about Elena. "She's not just an ex," he admitted, staring at his corn like it held answers. "We were together 2 years. Broke up 6 months ago, but she keeps showing up." His voice carried a mix of guilt and frustration, and I wondered what kind of history could make someone so angry yet so tethered. I told him about my own past, a string of fleeting dates, a family back in Chicago who loved me but didn't quite get me, and the quiet ache of wanting something real. "I'm not great at this," I confessed, gesturing vaguely between us. "But I don't poke just anyone with my corn." He laughed, a real laugh that broke the tension, and for a moment, the city felt like it belonged to us. We ended up on a bench in the park, the air cooling as night settled in. He pulled out his guitar, strumming a soft melody that felt like it was written just for that moment. "This one's new," he said, his fingers dancing over the strings. The lyrics were raw, about longing and fear, and I felt them in my chest, like he was singing my own unspoken thoughts. When he finished, our eyes met, and the space between us felt charged, like the air before a storm. But then his phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He glanced at it, his face clouding. "Elena," he muttered, silencing the call. I wanted to ask why she still had such a hold on him, but before I could, he leaned closer, his breath warm against my cheek. "I'm glad I met you, Jalen," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. My heart stuttered, but doubt crept in. Was this real, or was I just a distraction from whatever he was running from? We walked back to the subway, our shoulders brushing, the silence heavy with unspoken questions. As we parted ways, he grabbed my hand, squeezing it briefly. "Tomorrow?" he asked, almost shy. I nodded, too caught up to speak. But as I rode home alone, Elena's warning echoed in my head. He's got a habit of breaking things. I wanted to believe Mateo was worth the risk, but a part of me wondered if I was stepping into a story that might end in pieces. The next few weeks were a blur of stolen moments. Mateo and I met after work, sharing greasy tacos in food trucks, sneaking into late-night jazz clubs, and wandering the city's quieter corners. Each time, I fell harder for his laugh, his passion, the way he made every moment feel like it could spark something bigger. But Elena's shadow loomed. She texted him constantly, her name flashing on his phone like a warning light. He'd brush it off, but I saw the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes darkened when he thought I wasn't looking. One night, we ended up at a rooftop bar in Williamsburg, the Manhattan skyline glittering across the river. I'd brought one of my sketchbooks, showing him the characters I'd been drawing. Heroes and dreamers, like the ones I wished I could be. "You're good, Jalen," he said, his fingers tracing the edges of a page. "You should put this out there." His belief in me felt like a gift, but it came with a pang. Why couldn't he believe in us enough to let go of whatever held him back? As the night deepened, he kissed me under the string lights, soft and tentative at first, then hungry, like he'd been holding back for too long. The world fell away, leaving just us and the city's heartbeat. But when we pulled apart, his phone lit up again. "Elena." This time, he answered, stepping away to talk in hushed, urgent tones. I caught fragments. You can't keep doing this, and I'm trying to move on. When he returned, his face was a storm of guilt and resolve. I need to tell you something, he said, his voice low. Elena, he explained, wasn't just an ex. They'd been engaged, planning a life together until he came out as bisexual last year. She'd taken it hard, blaming herself, and their breakup had fractured their friend group. She thinks I'm confused, he said, his voice breaking. And sometimes I wonder if she's right. My heart sank, not because of his bisexuality, I got that, but because of the doubt in his eyes. Did he see me as a fling, a test, or something real? I reached for his hand, my voice steady despite the ache. You're not confused, Mateo. You're figuring it out, like we all are. But you've got to choose what you want. He looked at me, eyes searching, and for a moment, I thought he'd kiss me again. Instead, he nodded, squeezing my hand. I want this, he said, but the words felt fragile, like they could crack under pressure. We left the bar, the night air cool against my skin. As we walked, I felt the weight of his past and the uncertainty of our future. I wanted to be his anchor, but I wasn't sure I could hold him if he wasn't ready to stay. The turning point came at Mateo's first big gig, a small venue in the East Village packed with sweaty bodies and pulsing music. I stood in the crowd, my heart swelling as he poured himself into every note, his voice raw and electric. He dedicated a song to me. For the guy who poked me into something new, he'd said with a grin, and the crowd laughed, unaware of how much those words meant. I felt like I was flying, like we'd finally crossed some invisible line into something real. But after the set, Elena was there, waiting by the bar. She looked different, less angry, more broken. I need to talk to him, she told me, her voice soft but firm. I nodded, stepping back, though every instinct screamed to stay. They spoke for what felt like hours, their heads close, her hand on his arm. I watched from across the room, my chest tight, wondering if I'd been a fool to think I could compete with their history. When Mateo found me, his eyes were red-rimmed but clear. I told her it's over, he said. For good this time. I want to be with you, Jalen. No more running. I wanted to believe him, but fear gnawed at me. What changed? I asked, my voice barely steady. He took my hands, his grip firm. You make me feel like I can be myself, not someone's idea of who I should be. We left the venue, stepping into the cool night, the city alive around us. He kissed me on the sidewalk, unapologetic and fierce, and for the first time, I felt like we were building something that could last. Over the next months, we grew closer, navigating the messiness of love, his late-night songwriting sessions, my endless revisions to my graphic novel, the way we learned to lean on each other. Elena faded into the background, her calls unanswered, her shadow no longer looming. One evening, a year after the subway incident, we stood at the same vendor's cart on 14th Street, sharing a corn on the cob. You ever think about that day? Mateo asked, his eyes bright. I laughed, nudging him. Every time I eat corn. He grinned, pulling me close. Good. Because that poke changed everything. Our story wasn't perfect, but it was ours, born in a crowded subway, built on courage and choice, and anchored by the kind of love that dares to grow in the cracks of a chaotic world. We weren't just surviving, we were thriving, together, one messy, beautiful step at a time.